The moment Simone walked through the service entrance of the Grandeur Tower, she knew something was wrong. The charity gala invitation had said to arrive at 7, but when she texted Mitchell to confirm, he told her to come early through the back. She thought perhaps he wanted a quiet moment before the event started, maybe to fix his tie the way she always did, or to calm his nerves with her presence. Instead, Mitchell stood in the service corridor with Brenda, the event coordinator, both of them looking at her with expressions that made her stomach drop. Finally, Mitchell said, not with warmth but with irritation. "Brenda, get her fitted. I need all servers on the floor in 20 minutes. Simone stared at her husband of 6 years. "Servers? Mitchell, what are you talking about?" "The gala, Simone. Obviously." He gestured impatiently at the garment bag Brenda held. "We're short-staffed and I need people I can trust to handle the VIP section. You know how important tonight is for my career." Her mouth went dry. "You want me to serve drinks? At your event?" "Our event," he corrected, though his tone suggested it was anything but. "This charity gala could secure my partnership at the firm. Senator Wallace is coming, along with half the city's business elite. I need everything to be perfect. But I'm your wife." The words came out smaller than she intended. Mitchell's jaw tightened. "Which is exactly why I need you to help. Come on, Simone. Don't make this difficult. It's just serving a few drinks. You'll wear a nice uniform, smile, and help me make a good impression. Is that really too much to ask?" Brenda looked uncomfortable, shifting the garment bag from one arm to the other. Simone wanted to scream, to throw the uniform back in Mitchell's face, to demand the respect she deserved. But 6 years of marriage had taught her that fighting Mitchell in public only made things worse. He had a way of turning her objections into evidence of her being difficult, unsupportive, or worse, crazy. "I'll get changed," she heard herself say. The uniform was standard server attire: black pants, white button-down shirt, and a black vest. Simple and professional, but deeply humiliating when Simone knew she should be walking through the front entrance in the designer gown hanging in her closet at home. As she tied her hair back, she caught her reflection in the mirror. At 32, she was still the woman Mitchell had claimed to fall in love with, beautiful, with warm brown skin, expressive dark eyes, and the kind of smile that used to make him promise her the world. That man seemed like a stranger now. The Grandeur Tower's ballroom was magnificent. Soaring ceilings, crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. The space could accommodate 500 guests comfortably, and tonight it was filled with the city's most influential people. Simone knew every inch of this building, from the marble imported from Italy to the custom lighting system designed to showcase the art collection in the lobby. She knew it because she owned it. Not that Mitchell had any idea. "Simone, champagne to table 7, one of the senior servers directed, and she lifted a tray of crystal flutes, moving through the crowd with practiced grace. She'd worked plenty of service jobs when she was younger, building her first investments. She wasn't ashamed of the work, she was ashamed of being forced into it by her own husband. At table 7, she recognized faces from the society pages. Mrs. Henderson, the art collector. Mr. Zhao, who owned half the restaurants downtown. And there, holding court at the center, was Mitchell in his custom tuxedo, looking every bit the successful executive he pretended to be. And beside him, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, was Vanessa Chen. Simone's hand steadied through pure force of will as she approached. Vanessa worked in Mitchell's firm's marketing department. Simone had met her twice at company functions, both times briefly. The woman had seemed polite enough, if a bit cold. Now, watching Vanessa's hand rest possessively on Mitchell's arm, watching her laugh at something he whispered, Simone saw the truth she'd been too trusting to notice before. "Champagne," Simone offered, her voice professionally neutral. Mitchell glanced up, and for just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt? Annoyance? Then it was gone, replaced by the dismissive look she'd grown familiar with. "Thank you," he said as if she were any other server. But Vanessa smiled, the kind of smile a cat gives before pouncing. "You look familiar. Have we met?" "I don't believe so, ma'am," Simone replied, the words like glass in her throat. "Well, you're doing a wonderful job." Vanessa's fingers touched the diamond necklace at her throat, a delicate chain with a pendant that caught the light. Simone recognized it immediately. She'd seen the receipt on Mitchell's desk 3 weeks ago, the day before their anniversary. She thought it was for her. Mitchell cleared his throat. "That will be all." Simone walked away, her professional smile frozen in place. Behind her, she heard Vanessa's voice, deliberately loud enough to carry, "You're so generous, Mitchell, giving employment to people who need it. It really shows your charitable spirit. Mitchell's response was quieter, but she caught it. Just trying to help where I can. The rest of the evening blurred into a nightmare of fake smiles and careful steps. She watched Mitchell work the room, always with Vanessa nearby. She watched him accept compliments on his vision for the charity, a foundation supposedly dedicated to helping underprivileged youth that Simone suspected existed more on paper than in practice. She watched him laugh and charm and play the role of the successful, benevolent businessman. And then at 10 o'clock she watched him give a speech. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Mitchell began, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "This foundation represents everything I believe in: giving back, creating opportunities, and building a better future for our city. I couldn't have done any of this alone. My team at the firm has been incredible, especially Vanessa Chin, whose dedication and vision have been instrumental in making tonight possible." Vanessa stood and waved, gracious and poised. The crowd applauded. Mitchell continued, talking about vision and community and making a difference. Not once did he mention Simone. Not once did he acknowledge the woman he promised to love and honor. Because to him she realized she was just staff. Just someone useful when he needed her, invisible when he didn't. At 11, as guests began to leave, Simone collected empty glasses from a table near the windows. Her feet ached in the practical shoes she'd chosen, so different from the heels she'd planned to wear. She felt hollowed out, like someone had reached inside and removed something essential. "Excuse me, miss?" Simone turned to find an elderly woman, elegantly dressed, with kind eyes. "Yes, ma'am? I just wanted to say you've provided excellent service tonight. In my experience, the true measure of any event is how the staff performs, and you've been exceptional." Something in Simone's chest cracked. "Thank you," she managed. "What's your name, dear?" "Simone." The woman smiled. "Well, Simone, I hope your employer appreciates you. Good staff is hard to find." If only she knew, Simone thought. The woman moved away, and Simone was left alone with her tray of empty glasses, standing in the middle of a ballroom she owned, invisible in plain sight. Across the room, Mitchell had his arm around Vanessa's waist, both of them laughing about something. That was when Simone made her decision. She didn't know exactly what she would do yet, but she knew with absolute certainty that she was done being invisible. Done being disrespected. Done being treated like she was worth nothing by a man who was worth even less. Mitchell wanted to pretend she didn't exist? Fine. Soon enough, he'd learned that the woman he'd dismissed so easily was the only thing standing between him and complete destruction. And when that moment came, Simone wouldn't be there to catch him when he fell. She straightened her shoulders, collected the last of the glasses, and walked toward the service entrance. Tomorrow she would start planning. But tonight, she let herself feel the full weight of her humiliation, because she needed to remember this feeling. Needed to hold on to it. Needed to never, ever forget. The gala didn't end for Simone when the guests left. After the last attendee had departed at midnight, the servers were expected to help with initial cleanup, collecting remaining glasses, straightening chairs, and doing a final sweep of the ballroom. Simone found herself wiping down tables at 12:30, her body exhausted and her mind reeling. Through the double doors leading to the private VIP lounge, she could hear voices. Mitchell's laugh, distinctive and loud. And Vanessa saying something that made him laugh harder. The senior server, Gerald, touched her arm gently. "You can go, honey. We've got the rest." "Thank you." Simone's voice came out hoarse. She should have left. Should have collected her things and gone home. Instead, she found herself moving toward those doors, drawn by the sound of her husband's voice. She told herself she was just checking to see if they needed anything. She told herself a lot of lies in that moment. The doors weren't fully closed and she stopped just outside, hidden in shadow. "Did you see her face when you complimented the staff's work?" Vanessa's voice dripped with amusement. "I thought she might cry right there." Mitchell chuckled. "Simone? She's too timid to make a scene. That's always been her problem, no backbone. That's why tonight was perfect. She didn't even question it when I told her to serve. Still, wasn't it risky? Someone might have recognized her as your wife." "Please. I've been telling everyone for months that we're separated. Half the people here tonight think I'm single. And the ones who remember her from old firm events? They just assume she's fallen on hard times. Which honestly isn't far from the truth. What has she ever done with her life?" Simone's nails dug into her palms. "When will you file?" Vanessa asked. "Soon. My lawyer's drawing up the papers. The key is doing it before she gets any ideas about taking what I've built. I've already moved most of the liquid assets into accounts she doesn't know about. The apartment is in my name only, I made sure of that when we signed the lease 3 years ago. She'll get whatever the law requires for a short marriage, which is basically nothing. Maybe enough for a few months' rent on a studio apartment. She won't fight. With what? She has no money, no job, no skills. She doesn't even know how to hire a lawyer. I've made sure she's completely dependent on me. When I tell her I want a divorce, she'll probably be grateful I'm letting her go with anything at all. They were both laughing now. Laughing at how foolish she was, how easy to manipulate, how completely they deceived her. And she has no idea about the foundation accounts? Vanessa asked. None. As far as she knows, I'm a dedicated philanthropist. She doesn't understand complex finance. I've been skimming off the top for 2 years now. Small amounts, nothing that triggers audits. Between that and the company accounts I've accessed through creative bookkeeping, we've built up quite the nest egg. Our nest egg, Vanessa corrected playfully. Our nest egg, Mitchell agreed. By this time next year we'll be living in the penthouse we looked at last week. I'll have made partner, you'll be my wife, and Simone will be a distant memory. Just some simple woman I married when I was young and stupid, before I understood what I really wanted. What you really deserved, Vanessa added. Someone who can match your ambition, who understands your world. Not some naive little girl who thinks love conquers all. Simone's vision blurred. Her whole body felt cold, then hot, then numb. She backed away from the door slowly, carefully, her server's shoes silent on the polished floor. She made it to the service corridor, then to the small changing room where she'd left her purse and street clothes. Her hands shook so badly she could barely unbutton the vest. 6 years. 6 years of her life with a man who'd seen her as nothing more than a convenient fool. A man who'd been stealing, lying, and planning to leave her destitute while he rode off into the sunset with his mistress. She'd given up so much for him. Not her empire, she'd kept that secret, kept it safe. But she'd given up time, energy, and faith. She'd believed in their marriage, believed in the vows they'd made. She'd supported his career, attended his boring work functions, listened to his problems, and made their house a home. And he'd been planning to throw her away like garbage. Simone caught sight of herself in the mirror, still in the server's uniform, her hair falling out of its tie, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked defeated. Looked exactly like the weak, simple woman Mitchell thought she was. But she wasn't that woman. She never had been. When Simone walked out of the Grandeur Tower 20 minutes later, she was back in her own clothes. Simple jeans and a sweater, but they felt like armor. The night air was cool, and the city hummed around her with late-night traffic and distant sirens. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking up at the building that towered above her. Mitchell had no idea he'd just humiliated his wife in her own property. Had no idea that the foundation he was stealing from operated out of office space she controlled. Had no idea that the business partners he was impressing tonight had signed leases with her, not knowing her married name connected her to Mitchell. He thought he was so clever, moving money and planning his exit strategy. He had no idea he was an amateur playing games with someone who'd built an empire from nothing. Simone pulled out her phone and opened her contacts. It was late, but the person she needed would answer. Patricia Winters, attorney at law, specialized in complex divorces and asset protection. They'd met at a real estate conference 2 years ago and had become friendly, meeting for coffee occasionally to discuss business and life. The phone rang twice before a sleepy voice answered. Simone? It's almost 1 a.m. Is everything okay? No, Simone said clearly. Everything is very much not okay. But it's about to be. Patricia, I need to hire you. I'm divorcing my husband and I need it to be devastating. There was a pause, then Patricia's voice came back sharp and alert. Tell me everything. Simone started walking, the city lights blurring around her. And as she walked, she talked. She told Patricia about the gala, about the overheard conversation, about 6 years of being underestimated and dismissed. About a man who thought he was smart enough to steal and cruel enough to humiliate his wife without consequences. Can you meet tomorrow? Patricia asked when Simone finally stopped talking. Bring any financial documents you have access to, anything about his business dealings, any evidence of his affairs. We're going to need everything to build the case. I'll be there at 9. Simone? One more thing. From what you've told me, your husband has likely committed several crimes. Embezzlement, fraud, possibly more. Are you prepared for this to get public? Once we start pulling threads, this won't be a quiet divorce. Simone thought about Mitchell's laugh, about Vanessa's mocking smile, about standing in a server's uniform while her husband pretended she didn't exist. Good, she said. I want it loud. When she hung up, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, not yet. But purpose. Clarity. The fog of self-doubt and confusion that had been surrounding her for months was gone, burned away by righteous anger and cold determination. Mitchell thought he'd married someone weak. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Simone called a car and waited, watching the Grandeur Tower's lights. Tomorrow she would start dismantling Mitchell's life the same way he'd been dismantling their marriage, carefully, thoroughly, and without mercy. But tonight she let herself feel the pain of betrayal. Let herself mourn the death of a marriage that had been a lie from the start. Let herself be hurt by the man who'd promised to love her and had instead chosen to destroy her. Because tomorrow she would be done mourning. Tomorrow the real Simone would emerge from the shadows she'd been hiding in. And Mitchell had no idea what was coming for him. The car pulled up and Simone got in. As they drove away from the Grandeur Tower, she didn't look back. She was done looking at her past. From now on she only looked forward, toward justice, toward freedom, and toward the moment when Mitchell would finally see her for who she really was. And by then, it would be far too late for him to do anything about it. Simone didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat in the small home office of the apartment she shared with Mitchell, the apartment he believed he owned, and began pulling files from the locked drawer only she had keys to. Documents Mitchell had never seen, representing a life he'd never known she had. The story began 20 years ago when Simone was 12 years old. Her grandmother, Dorothy Miller, had been a force of nature. She'd worked as a seamstress her whole life, but she had a mind for business that would have made her rich if she'd been born in a different time, in a different body. Instead, she'd scrimped and saved and invested carefully, and by the time she retired, she owned a small commercial building in a neighborhood everyone said would never be worth anything. Everyone was wrong. Simone could still remember sitting in her grandmother's tiny kitchen, learning about rent rolls and property taxes and the power of owning something real. Land and buildings, baby girl, Dorothy would say, tapping the table for emphasis. That's what lasts. That's what they can't take from you if you're smart about it. When Dorothy died, Simone was 21 and fresh out of college with a business degree. She'd expected maybe some savings, maybe a few $1,000s to help her start her life. Instead, she inherited the building worth $200,000, with tenants already in place generating steady income. Most people would have sold it, taken the money, lived a little. Simone saw an opportunity. She kept the building, learned everything she could about property management, and worked 3 jobs to save every penny she could. Within 2 years, she'd saved enough to leverage her first building as collateral for a second property. Then a third. She had an eye for undervalued buildings in neighborhoods poised for growth. She was patient, strategic, and ruthless when she needed to be. By the time she was 26, she owned 6 commercial properties with a combined value of over $3 million. At 28, she'd expanded to 12 properties worth $15 million. She'd formed an LLC, hired a small but competent management team, and built systems that allowed her buildings to run smoothly without requiring her constant presence. And then, at a charity fundraiser she'd attended as a donor, she'd met Mitchell. He'd been charming that night. Attentive. He'd seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts, her opinions, her dreams. He'd talked about building a life together, about partnership and mutual support. For the first time since her grandmother died, Simone had felt like she'd found someone who could be her teammate in life. She'd been careful though. Years of being a young woman in commercial real estate had taught her that people treated you differently when they knew you had money. Some wanted to use you. Some resented you. Some saw you as a threat or a target. And as a black woman in a field dominated by older white men, she'd learned to be cautious about revealing her assets too quickly. So she told Mitchell she worked in property management. True, but misleading. She dressed modestly, lived in a nice but not extravagant apartment, and never mentioned the scope of her portfolio. She'd wanted him to fall in love with Simone the person, not Simone the real estate mogul. Looking back, she could see how naive that had been. Mitchell hadn't fallen in love with her at all. He'd seen someone he thought would be easy to control, easy to manipulate. Someone without power or resources of her own. The irony was almost funny. Almost. By the time they got married, Simone's portfolio had grown to 22 properties worth $45 million. She'd established 2 separate LLCs, set up trusts, and ensured that her premarital assets were completely protected. She'd been smart enough to keep everything separate, even if she hadn't been smart enough to see who Mitchell really was. And she'd kept building. Through their 6 years of marriage, while Mitchell thought she was just a housewife with a small part-time consulting job in property management, Simone had been closing deals, negotiating contracts, and expanding her empire. She attended meetings when Mitchell thought she was grocery shopping. She reviewed contracts when he thought she was at yoga. She made decisions that affected millions of dollars while he told his friends she was just simple. Now, sitting in her office at 2 in the morning, Simone pulled out her current portfolio summary. 43 commercial properties across the city. Total value, $847 million. Annual revenue after expenses, $23 million. And the crown jewel, the Grandeur Tower. 52 floors of premium office and event space, worth $450 million. She'd bought it 3 years ago, just before the neighborhood had exploded with development. Mitchell had attended events there a dozen times, never once questioning who owned the building, never once connecting the dots. Because why would he? To Mitchell she was just Simone. Simple, naive, helpless Simone. She pulled up her banking records. The accounts Mitchell knew about held maybe $15,000. Money she kept there to maintain the illusion of normalcy. Her real accounts, the ones connected to her businesses, held millions. She had investments, stocks, bonds, and a portfolio diversified enough to weather any economic storm. Mitchell thought he was leaving her destitute. He had no idea she could buy and sell him 100 times over. Simone's phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Can't sleep either. Preliminary research on your husband shows some interesting gaps in his financial disclosures. This is going to be fun. See you at 9. Fun. That was one word for it. Simone stood and walked to the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Mitchell was probably still celebrating his successful gala, probably planning his future with Vanessa, probably counting the money he thought he'd stolen. He had no idea the ground was already crumbling beneath his feet. The question now was how to handle the revelation. She could simply divorce him, keep her empire secret, and walk away clean. She'd lose nothing. The prenup she'd insisted on, which Mitchell had signed readily because he thought she had nothing to protect, would ensure her assets remained hers. But that felt too easy. Too kind. Mitchell had humiliated her, stolen from a charity meant to help disadvantaged youth, and planned to frame her for his crimes. He'd laughed about her supposed simplicity with his mistress. He'd made her serve drinks at her own building while he played the big man. No. A quiet divorce wasn't enough. Mitchell deserved to know exactly who he'd crossed. He deserved to understand the magnitude of his mistake. And he deserved to face consequences for his crimes. Simone opened her laptop and began making a list. Tomorrow, she'd meet with Patricia to discuss the divorce. But she'd also need to meet with her property managers, her accountant, and her head of security. She'd need to gather evidence of Mitchell's embezzlement, document his affair, and prepare for the moment when she'd reveal herself. Because that's what this would be, a revelation. Mitchell thought he knew his wife. He was about to discover he'd been living with a stranger. A stranger who was smarter, richer, and far more powerful than he'd ever imagined. The sun was starting to rise when Simone finally allowed herself to feel something other than anger. Underneath the betrayal and hurt, there was something else. Something that felt almost like relief. For 6 years, she'd hidden parts of herself. She'd made herself smaller, quieter, less threatening. She'd pretended to be the woman Mitchell wanted because she'd thought that's what marriage required. She'd been wrong. Marriage required honesty, respect, and equality, things Mitchell had never offered. Now she could stop pretending. Stop hiding. Stop making herself less so that Mitchell could feel like more. The real Simone was about to step into the light. And the world, especially Mitchell, was about to realize that the woman they dismissed was actually the most formidable person in the room. Simone smiled, her first genuine smile in months. Then she got up, made coffee, and began planning the most strategic, devastating, and absolutely justified takedown of her life. Mitchell wanted to play games? Fine. But he was playing checkers while she'd been playing chess all along. And in chess, the queen was the most powerful piece on the board. It was time for her to move. At exactly 9 o'clock, Simone walked into Patricia Winter's law office carrying 3 file folders and a thumb drive. Patricia's firm occupied the 15th floor of a sleek glass building downtown. Nice but not ostentatious. The reception area had comfortable chairs and modern art, the kind of place that whispered competence and discretion. Patricia met her personally, a tall woman in her mid-40s with silver-streaked black hair and eyes that missed nothing. Simone. Come in. Her office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a large desk covered in organized papers, and a sitting area with a couch and 2 chairs. Patricia gestured to the couch. Coffee? Please. As Patricia poured from a carafe, Simone looked at the diplomas on the wall. Harvard Law. Multiple certifications in family law, asset protection, and business litigation. Awards from women's legal organizations and pro bono groups. This was someone who could handle what was coming. All right, Patricia said, sitting across from her with a legal pad. Let's start with the basics. How long have you been married to Mitchell?
6 years.
No children. Do you have a prenuptial agreement?
Yes. I insisted on one.
He fought it at first, but I held firm. It specifies that all premarital assets remain separate property, and anything acquired during the marriage is divided according to who paid for it and whose name it's in.
Patricia raised an eyebrow.
That's unusually thorough. Most people don't think about those details. I had reasons to be careful.
I'm beginning to see that.
Patricia leaned forward. Before we go further, I need to understand what we're working with. Last night on the phone, you mentioned you have significant assets Mitchell doesn't know about. How significant are we talking? Simone opened the first folder and slid it across the coffee table. Patricia picked it up, flipped through the first few pages and went very still. This says you own 43 commercial properties worth. Patricia looked up, her professional composure cracking slightly. $847 million.
Approximately, yes.
The values fluctuate with the market.
And Mitchell doesn't know?
He knows I do some consulting work in property management. He doesn't know I own the properties. He certainly doesn't know the scope of it.
Patricia set down the folder carefully.
Okay. We're going to come back to this because it's extraordinary, but first, let's talk about what you heard last night. You said Mitchell was discussing embezzlement? Simone recounted the entire conversation she'd overheard, as close to word for word as she could remember. Patricia took notes, her pen moving quickly across the legal pad. And Vanessa Chen is his accomplice?
Patricia asked. That's what it sounded like.
He mentioned our nest egg and moving money through creative bookkeeping.
Do you have any evidence of this?
Bank statements, emails, documents?
Not yet. That's why I need help.
I don't have access to his work accounts or the foundation accounts. But I know someone who might be able to help us get it legally.
Who?
Simone pulled out her phone and scrolled to a contact.
James Richardson.
He's a forensic accountant I've worked with on several property acquisitions. He specializes in uncovering hidden assets and financial fraud. If Mitchell's been moving money, James can find it.
Good.
We'll need a private investigator too. Someone who can document the affair and follow the money trail from the outside while your accountant works on the financial angle. I was hoping you might have someone you trust.
Patricia smiled. I have just the person. Diana Foster. Former FBI, now works private.
She's discreet, thorough, and she doesn't miss anything. Between her and your forensic accountant, we should be able to build a comprehensive picture of what Mitchell's been doing.
How long will this take?
For a full investigation? Probably a month, maybe 6 weeks.
We need to be thorough.
If Mitchell's committed crimes, and based on what you've told me I'm confident he has, we want ironclad evidence before we move. Evidence that will hold up in court and with law enforcement.
Simone nodded.
A month felt like forever, but she understood the need for patience. What do I do in the meantime?
You act normal.
Continue being the wife he thinks you are. Don't let him suspect anything has changed. Can you do that?
Could she?
Could she look Mitchell in the face every day knowing what she knew and pretend everything was fine? Could she smile and nod and play the role of the naive, simple wife while secretly building a case against him?
Yes, Simone said. I can do that.
Good. Because we need him to feel secure. If he suspects you're on to him, he might accelerate his plans or move assets we haven't tracked yet. We need him relaxed and confident. Patricia stood and walked to her desk, pulling out several documents. I'm going to draw up a retainer agreement. Standard fee structure for a divorce of this complexity, plus additional costs for the investigation. Given your assets, I'm recommending we also bring in a white-collar crime attorney to advise us on the criminal aspects. If we're going to report Mitchell's embezzlement, we need to ensure you're protected from any blowback.
Why would there be blowback?
I didn't know about the crimes. You didn't, but you're married to him. Sometimes spouses get tangled in these things, especially if he's forged your signature or used your name without authorization. We need to make sure you're completely clean before we start throwing punches. Over the next 2 hours, Simone signed papers, wrote a check for the retainer, and answered what felt like 1,000 questions about her life with Mitchell. Patricia was methodical, asking about everything from their first date to their current sleeping arrangements, from Mitchell's work schedule to the names of his closest friends. One more thing, Patricia said as they finished. The Grandeur Tower where the gala was held last night. You said you own it?
Yes.
Does Mitchell's firm rent space there? No, but the foundation does. They have a small office on the 14th floor. I never made the connection before because Mitchell used a different business name when he signed the lease. I only realized it after I went through my tenant list last night. Patricia's smile was sharp. So Mitchell has been paying you rent with money he likely embezzled from the foundation?
I suppose he has. That's poetic. We're going to use that.
Patricia walked Simone to the door. I'll contact Diana and your forensic accountant today. We should be able to start gathering evidence by the end of the week. In the meantime, document everything. Keep a journal of Mitchell's comings and goings, any unusual behavior, any conversations about money or the foundation. Take photos if you see anything suspicious.
And Simone.
Yes. What Mitchell did to you last night was cruel. What he's been planning is worse. You're doing the right thing by fighting back. Don't let guilt or second thoughts weaken your resolve. This man has been stealing from charity and planning to destroy your life. He deserves everything that's coming to him. Simone left Patricia's office feeling more grounded than she had in years. The plan was in motion. The pieces were moving into place. And soon Mitchell's carefully constructed house of lies would come crashing down around him. She spent the rest of the day meeting with James Richardson, who listened to her story with growing outrage, and agreed to start investigating Mitchell's finances immediately. If he's been embezzling, I'll find it, James promised. These guys always think they're smarter than they are. They leave trails. By evening, Simone was back in the apartment, preparing dinner when Mitchell came home. He looked tired but satisfied, loosening his tie as he walked in.
Hey, he said. How was your day?
Fine. How was yours?
Good.
The gala was a huge success. Senator Wallace pulled me aside at the end and said he was impressed. I think the partnership is basically locked in now. He grabbed a beer from the fridge. Oh, and thank you for helping out last night. I know it wasn't what you expected, but you really saved me when we were short-staffed. Simone stirred the pasta sauce, keeping her back to him so he wouldn't see her expression.
It's fine.
You're the best, you know that? I'm lucky to have such an understanding wife. The words were acid in her ears. Understanding. That's what he called it when she swallowed her humiliation and played along with his games. That's what he called it when she made herself small and invisible so he could shine. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes, she said evenly. Perfect. I need to make a few calls first anyway. Mitchell disappeared into his home office, and Simone heard the door click shut. She stood at the stove, mechanically stirring sauce, and thought about Patricia's words. Don't let guilt or second thoughts weaken your resolve. She wouldn't. Not after what Mitchell had done. Not after what he'd planned to do. This was just the beginning. The investigation would take weeks, but when it was done, Simone would have everything she needed. Evidence of embezzlement, proof of the affair, documentation of Mitchell's plans to defraud her. And then, when the moment was right, she would strike. Not with violence or revenge, but with truth and justice. She would expose Mitchell for exactly what he was, and she would do it in a way that ensured he could never hurt anyone else again. The pasta timer went off and Simone drained the noodles. In his office, Mitchell laughed at something, probably talking to Vanessa. Simone plated the food, called him to dinner, and sat across from him at their table. And she smiled. Because Mitchell thought he was winning. He thought he was the smart one, the successful one, the one in control. He had no idea that his wife had just hired the best divorce attorney in the city, set a forensic accountant on his trail, and put a former FBI agent on his case. He had no idea the clock had started ticking on his freedom. And he certainly had no idea that the simple, naive woman sitting across from him was going to be the last person he should have ever crossed. 3 weeks later, Simone sat in Patricia's office again, this time joined by James Richardson and Diana Foster. The conference table was covered with documents, photographs, and flash drives. The evidence they'd compiled was devastating. Diana spoke first, a compact woman with short gray hair and eyes that had seen everything. Let's start with the affair. I've been following Mitchell and Vanessa for 21 days. They meet at her apartment at least 3 times a week, usually after work. They've also taken 2 weekend trips together, which Mitchell covered by telling you he had work conferences. Diana pushed several photos across the table. Mitchell and Vanessa entering her building. Kissing in a parking garage. Holding hands at a restaurant 40 miles outside the city. Each image was time-stamped and geotagged. The affair has been going on for at least 18 months, possibly longer, Diana continued. Vanessa moved to the city 2 years ago for the job at Mitchell's firm. I've interviewed several of her former colleagues who say the two of them were spending a lot of time together almost immediately. Simone looked at the photos and felt nothing. No pain, no anger, no jealousy. Mitchell had killed whatever feelings she had for him the night of the gala. Now he was just a problem to be solved. The embezzlement is more interesting, James said, pulling up a laptop. Mitchell has been skimming from the Youth Foundation for 32 months. Small amounts at first, $2,000 here, $3,000 there. Nothing that would trigger audits. But over time the amounts increased. In the last year alone, he's taken $187,000. How was he doing it? Patricia asked. Fake vendor accounts mostly. He'd submit invoices for services that were never rendered, or inflate real invoices and pocket the difference. He also created a consulting company that exists only on paper and paid it from foundation funds. Vanessa helped him set up the shell companies. Her name is on several of the accounts. James pulled up spreadsheets showing the money trail. Here's where it gets worse. Mitchell also has access to discretionary accounts at his firm. I found irregularities there too, expense reports for client entertainment that never happened, vendor payments to companies he controls, and several large transfers that appear to be kickbacks from contractors. How much total? Simone asked. From the foundation and his firm combined? Approximately $340,000 over 3 years. Patricia whistled. That's enough for serious prison time. Multiple felonies. We're talking 5 to 10 years if he's convicted. There's more, James said grimly. Last week, Mitchell transferred $50,000 from the foundation account to a new LLC in the Cayman Islands. That's likely where he's been moving the bulk of the stolen money. I'm still working on tracing all of it, but I've found evidence of at least $200,000 in offshore accounts. Can we trace the Cayman accounts to him? I've got a contact who specializes in offshore assets. Give me another week and I'll have every account, every transaction, and every dollar Mitchell's tried to hide. Diana spoke again. There's one more thing. I interviewed several junior employees at Mitchell's firm. 3 of them report that Mitchell has created a hostile work environment. One woman, Tanya Brooks, said Mitchell made unwanted advances and then retaliated when she rejected him by tanking her performance reviews and blocking her promotion. Simone's hands clenched. He sexually harassed someone? According to Tanya, yes. She filed an HR complaint 8 months ago, but Mitchell's friendship with the managing partner meant it went nowhere. She's now looking for work elsewhere because the environment became unbearable. Will she testify? Patricia asked. She's willing to give a statement if it matters for the criminal case. She's tired of Mitchell getting away with everything. Patricia looked at Simone. With this evidence we can do several things. We can file for divorce on grounds of adultery and fraud. We can report the embezzlement to the authorities and the foundation board. We can report the firm-level fraud to the managing partner and the ethics board. And we can help Tanya file a civil lawsuit for sexual harassment and retaliation. I want all of it, Simone said. Everything. I want Mitchell to face every single consequence of his actions. It's going to get messy. Once we start pulling threads, Mitchell's entire life is going to unravel in public. Good. Patricia smiled. All right then. Here's how we'll proceed. First, we file the divorce. That protects you legally and starts the clock on asset division. Not that there will be much to divide since you kept everything separate. Second, we send all the financial evidence to the authorities. The FBI has a white-collar crime division that will jump on this. Third, we notify the foundation board and Mitchell's firm. Let them handle him internally while the criminal case builds. When? Simone asked. We need to wait for James to finish tracing the offshore accounts. Once we have the complete picture, we move. Probably 2 weeks. There's something else I want, Simone said slowly. Mitchell is planning another event at the Grandeur Tower. A big one scheduled for 2 weeks from now. He's calling it an investor celebration for a new business venture. Diana frowned. What kind of venture? I don't know the details, but from what I've overheard, it's some kind of investment opportunity he's pitching to wealthy clients. He's been making calls, setting up meetings, getting people excited about projected returns. James looked alarmed. That sounds like he's planning to defraud investors. If he's promising returns on a fake investment opportunity, that's securities fraud, Patricia finished. A whole new level of crime. Can we stop him? Simone asked. We can report our suspicions to the SEC and the FBI, but without hard evidence of the fraud, they might not move fast enough. Do you have access to any details about this investment opportunity? Not yet. But I own the building. I can have my security team keep an eye on things. Maybe install a few extra cameras in the event space he's booked. Diana grinned. I like the way you think. Here's what I propose, Simone said, her mind working through the possibilities. We let Mitchell have his event. We gather evidence of whatever fraud he's planning.
We invite the authorities, make sure they're ready to move. And then, at the event, we expose everything. All at once. In front of all his potential victims and everyone he's been trying to impress. Patricia leaned back. That's bold. Also risky. If something goes wrong. Nothing will go wrong. Because I'll control the venue, the security, and the evidence. Mitchell thinks he's throwing a celebration at some random building. He has no idea he's walking into my territory. There was a long silence. Then Patricia laughed. You know what? I've been practicing law for 20 years and I've never done anything like this. But given what Mitchell's done, given how he's treated you, and given that we can protect his potential victims while taking him down, I'm in. Me too, Diana said. Absolutely, James agreed. Let's burn this guy's life down. They spent the next hour planning. James would finish tracing the offshore accounts and get documentation on Mitchell's planned investment fraud. Diana would continue surveillance and start building a timeline of events for the authorities. Patricia would prepare the divorce filing and coordinate with the FBI, the SEC, and the Foundation's board of directors. And Simone would prepare the grandeur tower for the most important event it had ever hosted, the complete and total destruction of Mitchell's career, reputation, and freedom. When the meeting ended and everyone left, Simone sat alone for a moment. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 weeks ago, hurt, humiliated, broken. That woman had served drinks while her husband laughed with his mistress. That woman had believed she was powerless. She wasn't that woman anymore. Maybe she never had been. She'd just forgotten who she really was for a little while. But now she remembered. She was Simone, who'd built an empire from a single building her grandmother left her. She was Simone, who'd turned $200,000 into $847 million through smart decisions and hard work. She was Simone, who owned the ground Mitchell walked on without him even knowing it. And in 2 weeks, Mitchell would finally understand exactly who he'd been living with. He'd understand that the woman he'd dismissed as simple was actually brilliant. The woman he'd thought was weak was actually powerful. The woman he'd planned to destroy was actually indestructible. Simone gathered her things and headed home. Mitchell would be there, probably working on his fraudulent investment scheme, probably planning his future with Vanessa, probably congratulating himself on how clever he'd been. Let him celebrate. Let him feel confident and secure. Because the higher he climbed, the farther he'd fall. And Simone would be there to watch him hit the ground. The next 2 weeks were the strangest of Simone's life. By day, she played the role of Mitchell's accommodating wife, cooking his meals, doing his laundry, listening to his stories about work. By night, she was a general planning a war, coordinating with her team to ensure every detail was perfect for Mitchell's downfall. Mitchell suspected nothing. If anything, he seemed more relaxed than usual, more openly dismissive. He stopped pretending to care about her day. He took calls from Vanessa while Simone was in the room, not even bothering to hide the intimate tone of his voice. Twice he stayed out all night, coming home at dawn with weak excuses about work emergencies. Simone documented everything. The investment scheme became clearer as the event approached. Mitchell had created something called the Urban Renaissance Fund, promising investors 40% annual returns through strategic real estate investments and urban development projects. He'd produced glossy brochures, projected returns, and testimonials from satisfied clients, all of it fake. James had confirmed there was no actual fund. The bank accounts Mitchell had set up were shells. Any money investors put in would go straight into his and Vanessa's pockets, probably to offshore accounts where it would be nearly impossible to trace. He's targeting people with serious money, James told Simone during one of their strategy meetings. Doctors, lawyers, business owners. People who have cash to invest but maybe don't have the financial literacy to see through a sophisticated con. He's planning to raise at least $5 million at this event. How many potential victims? He's invited 40 people. If even half of them invest an average of $250,000, that's $5 million. But based on the commitments he's already secured, I think he's expecting closer to $7 million. Simone felt sick. Mitchell wasn't just stealing from a foundation or his employer anymore. He was planning to defraud regular people out of their life savings. People who'd worked hard for their money and trusted the wrong person. We have to stop him before anyone writes a check, she said. We will, Patricia promised. The FBI is fully briefed. They'll have agents at the event, ready to move once Mitchell starts taking investments. The SEC is standing by too. The moment he makes his pitch and starts collecting money, they'll arrest him for securities fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. Diana had been busy too. I've interviewed 3 of the people Mitchell's targeting, she reported. All of them think he's legitimate because of his position at the firm and his charity work. They have no idea they're about to be scammed. I've also documented 12 meetings where Mitchell and Vanessa discussed the con, including one where they laughed about how easy it would be to fool people who don't understand finance. Everything was falling into place. Simone had worked with her building security team to install additional cameras in the event space, all trained on the podium where Mitchell would make his pitch. She'd arranged for the audio system to be controlled from a separate location, just in case she needed to make an announcement of her own. She'd even had her team do a test run to ensure everything worked perfectly. The night before the event, Mitchell came home excited. He poured himself a drink and loosened his tie, practically glowing. "Tomorrow's going to change everything," he said. "This fund is going to make me rich. Partner at the firm, my own money, complete financial independence. Everything I've worked for is finally coming together." Simone, chopping vegetables for dinner, made herself ask, "What about us?" Mitchell looked at her with something like pity. "What about us? I mean, when you're a partner and everything changes, what happens to our life together?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he shrugged. "I guess we'll see. Things might have to change. But don't worry about it, okay? Just focus on being supportive tomorrow. I need you to be there at the event." "At the event?" "Yeah. It looks good if my wife is there. Shows stability, family values. Investors like that." He swirled his drink. "You don't have to do anything. Just stand near me, smile and look pretty. Can you handle that?" Simone thought about the FBI agents who would be in the crowd. About the evidence compiled in 3 thick folders in Patricia's office. About the moment, less than 24 hours away, when Mitchell's world would explode. "I can handle that," she said quietly. That night, Simone couldn't sleep. She lay in the guest room. She'd started sleeping there 2 weeks ago, claiming Mitchell's snoring was keeping her awake, and ran through the plan again and again. So many things could go wrong. Mitchell could cancel the event. He could sense something was off. A technical problem could derail the exposure. But at 3 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Everything is set. FBI and SEC agents will be in position by 6 p.m. Building security briefed. Your role is simple. When Mitchell finishes his pitch and starts collecting investments, you step forward and introduce yourself as the building owner. That's the signal. We take it from there." Simone typed back, "Understood." Another text came through, this time from Diana. "Final surveillance complete. Mitchell and Vanessa met tonight at her apartment. Audio confirms they're planning to leave the country immediately after collecting the money. They have tickets to the Caymans for tomorrow night." So that was the plan. Take the money and run, leaving Simone behind to deal with angry investors and possibly face legal consequences for fraud she'd known nothing about. Mitchell had probably even planned to make it look like she was involved, giving himself cover while he disappeared with Vanessa and millions of dollars. The cruelty of it took her breath away. 6 years of marriage, and he'd been willing to frame her for his crimes and leave her to face prison while he lived in luxury. At 7 a.m., Simone got up, showered, and dressed carefully. Not in a server's uniform this time. She chose a tailored navy suit, simple but expensive, with heels that added 3 inches to her height. She wore her grandmother's pearl necklace, a reminder of the woman who'd taught her to be strong and smart. Mitchell was already up, practically vibrating with excitement. "Big day," he said, grinning. "You ready?" "Ready," Simone confirmed. They arrived at the Grandeur Tower at 5 p.m. Mitchell had booked the same ballroom where his gala had been, never knowing that every time he'd walked through those doors, he'd been in Simone's territory. Event staff were setting up chairs and a podium. A professional-looking banner read Urban Renaissance Fund, Building Tomorrow's Cities Today. Tables were positioned around the room where investors could review materials and write checks. Everything looked legitimate, professional, and completely fake. Mitchell was in his element, checking details and directing staff. Vanessa arrived at 5:30, looking elegant in a cream-colored dress. She and Mitchell exchanged a quick kiss when they thought no one was looking. Simone watched from the side of the room, her heart steady. Around her, she recognized several faces from Diana's briefing. FBI agents posing as potential investors, an SEC lawyer pretending to be a doctor interested in the fund, even a journalist Diana had tipped off who was hiding in plain sight with a camera. At 6 p.m., guests started arriving. Wealthy people in expensive clothes, excited about the opportunity Mitchell had presented. Simone felt a wave of relief that none of them would actually lose money tonight. They'd be angry and embarrassed when they learned the truth, but at least they'd be safe. By 6:30, 43 people filled the ballroom. Mitchell took the podium,
confidence radiating from every pore. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "Tonight, I'm going to offer you an opportunity that most people only dream about. A chance to get in on the ground floor of the next major urban development boom." Simone stood at the back of the room waiting. Patricia was positioned near the exit, watching for her signal. Diana sat in the second row, recording everything. James was in the building security office, ready to pull up financial documents on command. Mitchell's pitch was smooth, practiced, convincing. He showed charts and graphs, projected returns and testimonials. He talked about his experience, his connections, and his vision for the future. He made it sound like the easiest money anyone would ever make. And then, as he reached the climax of his pitch, as he asked who was ready to invest in the Urban Renaissance Fund, as people around the room started reaching for their checkbooks, Simone walked forward. Mitchell saw her approaching and frowned slightly, probably wondering why his mousy wife was interrupting his moment. But he kept his professional smile in place. "Ah, my wife, Simone," he said smoothly. "Maybe she wants to." "Actually," Simone said, her voice carrying clearly across the room, "I'd like to say a few words. If you don't mind." The audience turned to look at her with mild curiosity. Mitchell's frown deepened, but he couldn't object without looking bad. He stepped aside, letting her take the podium. Simone looked out at the crowd, at Mitchell's confused face, at Vanessa's suspicious expression. She thought about the woman she'd been a month ago, serving drinks while her husband mocked her. That woman was gone. "Good evening," she said. "Before anyone makes an investment decision tonight, there's something you should know. My name is Simone Harper and I own this building." The room went very quiet. "I own the Grandeur Tower along with 42 other commercial properties in this city. And I'm very sorry to tell you this, but the Urban Renaissance Fund that my soon-to-be ex-husband just pitched to you is a complete fraud." Mitchell's face went white. "Everything he told you tonight is a lie. There is no fund. There are no development projects. Your money would go directly into his pocket and then disappear into offshore accounts he set up with his mistress, who I believe you all know as Vanessa Chen." The audience erupted. People stood, voices rose, questions flew. But Simone kept talking, her voice calm and steady. "The FBI and SEC are here tonight, and they have evidence of embezzlement, securities fraud, and money laundering. But more importantly, they're here to protect you. To make sure none of you become victims of this scam." Patricia stepped forward, flanked by 2 FBI agents who moved toward Mitchell. Vanessa tried to run, but Diana was faster, blocking the exit. "Mitchell Harper," one of the agents said, "you're under arrest for securities fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud." The ballroom erupted into chaos. People were shouting, cameras were flashing, and Mitchell, finally beautifully, looked completely devastated as the agents handcuffed him. His eyes found Simone's across the room. In them she saw shock, betrayal, and the dawning realization that he'd made a terrible mistake. "You," he breathed. "You did this." "No," Simone said clearly. "You did this. I just made sure everyone found out." As the agents led Mitchell away, as Vanessa was cuffed and read her rights, as the potential investors clustered around Patricia to get information, Simone stood at the podium in her building and felt the weight of 6 years of pretending lift from her shoulders. She was done hiding. Done being small. Done letting anyone make her feel less than the powerful, brilliant woman she'd always been. Mitchell had ordered his wife to serve drinks at his gala, never knowing she owned the building. Now he knew. Now everyone knew. And it was just the beginning. The aftermath of Mitchell's arrest played out in stages, each one more satisfying than the last. Within hours of his arrest, news of the fraud spread through social media and local news outlets. The journalist Diana had tipped off published a comprehensive article detailing Mitchell's crimes, complete with quotes from the FBI about sophisticated financial fraud and protection of potential victims. By midnight, the story had gone national. Simone watched from her real apartment, not the modest place she'd shared with Mitchell, but the penthouse she actually owned in a building across town. The space was 3,000 square feet of modern luxury with floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, and original art on the walls. This was where she'd been living in her head for 6 years while pretending to be someone smaller. Now she could finally live here in reality. Her phone buzzed constantly with texts. Patricia sent updates on Mitchell's booking and arraignment. James confirmed that the FBI had frozen all of Mitchell's accounts, including the offshore ones. Diana forwarded news articles as they appeared, each headline more damning than the last. Real estate mogul exposes husband's fraud. Wife owns building where husband arrested for investment scam. Charity leader charged with embezzlement. Wife reveals secret fortune. The next morning, Simone had a meeting with the foundation board. They sat in a conference room at the Grandeur Tower, her building, her conference room, looking shell-shocked. Mrs. Harper, the board president, Dr. Ellis, began carefully, "We owe you an apology. We had no idea Mitchell was stealing from the foundation or planning this investment fraud. If we'd been more vigilant." "You couldn't have known," Simone interrupted. "Mitchell was careful. He knew how to hide his tracks. But now you have all the evidence you need to recover what he stole and to press charges. The foundation will cooperate fully with law enforcement," Dr. Ellis assured her. "We're also reviewing all of our financial controls to ensure this never happens again. And," he paused, "we understand you're the landlord of our office space." "I am. We'd like to assure you that the foundation itself is legitimate. The board members are volunteers and we've been doing real work helping disadvantaged youth for years. Mitchell was supposed to be overseeing finances, but the actual program work was done by others. We hope you'll consider allowing us to remain as tenants." Simone had already thought about this. "I'll keep you as tenants, but I want to be involved. I'm establishing a separate foundation focused on helping women achieve financial independence. I'd like our organizations to partner on some initiatives. Teaching financial literacy, supporting female entrepreneurs, things like that." Dr. Ellis looked relieved. "We would be honored." That afternoon, Simone met with Tanya Brooks, the woman Mitchell had harassed at his firm. Tanya was in her late 20s, bright and ambitious, with short natural hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that Mitchell had probably found threatening. "Thank you for meeting me," Simone said. "Patricia told me what Mitchell did to you." Tanya's jaw tightened. "He made my life hell for 8 months. Every day I came to work not knowing what new way he'd find to undermine me. I thought about quitting, but I worked so hard to get that job." "You don't have to explain. I understand what it's like when someone powerful decides to make you their target." "The firm's HR did nothing. They protected him because he brought in business. It was like my career didn't matter." "It matters," Simone said firmly. "And now Mitchell can't hurt you anymore. He's facing criminal charges and his career is over. But more than that, I want to help you. Patricia can assist with a civil lawsuit against both Mitchell and the firm. They failed to protect you and they should face consequences." Tanya looked surprised. "I can't afford." "Patricia will work on contingency. And if you need support while the case progresses, I have connections at several firms that would be lucky to have you. I'm also starting a foundation that will need program directors. People who understand what it's like to face workplace discrimination and can help other women navigate it." For the first time since they'd sat down, Tanya smiled. "You're serious?" "Completely. Mitchell hurt a lot of people. I'm in a position to help fix some of that damage. Let me." They talked for another hour, and by the end, Tanya had agreed to both the lawsuit and a job interview with Simone's foundation. Watching her leave with her shoulders straighter and her head higher, Simone felt something she hadn't expected: purpose. Mitchell had thought she was simple because she didn't chase power the way he did. He'd mistaken kindness for weakness. But Simone was learning that real power wasn't about dominance or control. It was about using resources to help others, to create opportunities, to make the world a little less cruel. The divorce proceedings moved swiftly. With Mitchell in jail facing multiple felony charges, and with evidence of his affair and embezzlement, there was no question about fault. The prenuptial agreement she'd insisted on meant Simone kept every single asset she'd brought into the marriage, which was all of them. Mitchell tried to argue through his lawyer that he deserved something, that he'd supported Simone during their marriage. Patricia had laughed so hard she'd nearly cried. "Your client supported my client?" Patricia had said during one particularly contentious conference call. "Your client made my client serve drinks at a gala while he cavorted with his mistress. Your client planned to frame my client for fraud and leave her to face criminal charges. Your client has stolen from charities, harassed employees, and defrauded investors. He's lucky my client is only divorcing him and not suing him separately for emotional distress." Mitchell ended up with nothing. Less than nothing actually, because his legal fees were mounting and his assets were frozen pending the criminal trial. Vanessa was released on bail after agreeing to testify against Mitchell. She tried to contact Simone once, a desperate text message that read, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know he was lying to me too. He said you were separated. Please, can we talk?" Simone had blocked the number without responding. She had nothing to say to Vanessa. The other woman was facing her own charges and would have to live with her choices. 2 weeks after Mitchell's arrest, Simone met with her full property management team for the first time as her full self. No more hiding behind consultants or using intermediaries. She walked into the conference room in her building and introduced herself as the owner of the entire portfolio. "Some of you may have seen the news about my ex-husband," she said. "I want to be clear. I built this business long before I met him, and his actions have nothing to do with our operations. He never had access to our accounts, never knew the full scope of our work, and never influenced any of our business decisions." Her team looked relieved. "We've been fielding some questions from tenants," her property manager, Grace, said. "People wanting to know if the buildings are in any legal trouble. Tell them the truth. These properties are and always have been owned and operated by separate legal entities that have nothing to do with Mitchell Harper. Every tenant's lease is secure. Every building is financially sound. Business continues as usual." They spent the rest of the meeting discussing upcoming projects, potential acquisitions, and plans for the new foundation. Simone felt energized by the conversation, engaged in a way she hadn't been in years. She'd been running this empire in secret for so long that she'd forgotten how satisfying it was to work openly with talented people toward shared goals. As the meeting ended, Grace approached her. "Can I say something?" "Of course. I've worked in commercial real estate for 15 years, and I've never seen anyone build something like this so young and with so little starting capital. You're brilliant at what you do. I hope you know that." Simone felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. And that thing you did at Mitchell's event? That was the most badass thing I've ever seen. You probably saved a dozen people from losing their life savings." Later, alone in her office, Simone looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Mitchell sat in a jail cell, probably still trying to figure out what had happened. Still trying to understand how his simple, naive wife had orchestrated his complete destruction. She wondered if he realized yet that she'd never been simple. Never been naive. She'd just been a woman protecting herself from a man she'd foolishly thought she could trust. The phone rang. "Patricia. The prosecution wants to know if you'll testify at Mitchell's trial," she said. "You don't have to, but your perspective as someone who witnessed his behavior could be powerful." Simone thought about it. She could stay out of it, let the evidence speak for itself, maintain her privacy. Or she could face Mitchell one more time and tell her truth in open court. "I'll do it," she said. "I want him to hear exactly how much he underestimated me." "That's my girl," Patricia said warmly. When she hung up, Simone allowed herself a small smile. The worst was over. Mitchell was facing justice. Vanessa was cooperating with prosecutors. The potential victims had been protected. And Simone was finally free to live as herself. No more hiding, no more pretending, no more making herself smaller. She thought about her grandmother Dorothy, who'd worked so hard and left behind one small building. "I did what you taught me," Simone whispered to the empty office. "I built something that lasts. Something they can't take away." Outside her window, the Grandeur Tower stood tall against the evening sky. 43 buildings scattered across the city, each one a piece of the empire she'd built. Mitchell had tried to tear her down, tried to steal her dignity, tried to destroy her life. Instead, he'd destroyed his own. And Simone had barely broken a sweat doing it. The next chapter of her life was beginning, and this time she was writing it on her own terms. 4 months after Mitchell's arrest, Simone walked into the courthouse wearing a charcoal gray suit and her grandmother's pearls. The trial had been the talk of the city, a respected businessman revealed as a con artist, a seemingly simple housewife revealed as a commercial real estate mogul. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters and cameras. Patricia walked beside her, a solid presence. "Remember, just tell the truth. Don't let his lawyer rattle you. You're the victim here, not him." "I know," Simone said calmly. She'd been preparing for this day, going over her testimony with Patricia until she could recite the facts in her sleep. But it wasn't the facts she was worried about. It was seeing Mitchell again. Inside, the courtroom was surprisingly small and ordinary. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, uncomfortable benches for spectators. Mitchell sat at the defense table with his lawyer, an expensive-looking man named Robert Carlson who'd made his name defending white-collar criminals. Mitchell looked smaller than Simone remembered. 4 months in jail awaiting trial had taken a toll. He was thinner, paler, and his expensive suits had been replaced with a cheap one that didn't fit right. When he saw her enter, something flickered across his face. Anger, shame, regret. Simone didn't care which. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Jennifer Ross, had laid out the case methodically over 3 days of testimony. Former employees testified about Mitchell's embezzlement. FBI agents explained the money trail. James Richardson walked the jury through spreadsheets showing exactly how Mitchell had stolen funds. Tanya Brooks testified about harassment and retaliation, her voice steady and strong. Now it was Simone's turn. "The prosecution calls Simone Harper," Jennifer announced. Simone walked to the witness stand, was sworn in, and took her seat. The jury, 8 women and 4 men diverse in age and background, watched her with interest. Jennifer began gently. "Mrs. Harper, can you explain your relationship to the defendant?" "Mitchell Harper is my ex-husband. We were married for 6 years before I filed for divorce following his arrest." "During your marriage, did you work?" "Yes. I own and operate a commercial real estate investment company. I have a portfolio of 43 properties with a combined value of approximately $847 million. There was a murmur in the courtroom. Several jury members looked surprised. Mitchell stared at his hands. "And did your husband know about your business?" "No. I never told him the full scope of my work or assets." "Why not?" Simone took a breath. "When I met Mitchell, I'd already built a successful business. I'd learned that some people treated me differently when they knew about my wealth. I wanted him to love me for who I was, not what I had. So I told him I did consulting work in property management, which was technically true but didn't convey the full picture." "Did you keep your assets separate?" "Yes. We had a prenuptial agreement that specified all premarital assets remained separate property. During our marriage, I maintained complete financial independence." "Mrs. Harper, can you tell the jury about the night of October 15th, the night of the defendant's charity gala?" This was the hard part. Simone had known it would be, but preparing for it didn't make it easier. "Mitchell told me there was a charity gala for his foundation. I planned to attend as his wife. When I arrived, he told me they were short-staffed and asked me to work as a server." "How did that make you feel?" "Objection." Mitchell's lawyer stood. "Relevance. Your Honor, the defendant's treatment of Mrs. Harper establishes his character and his belief that he could manipulate her without consequence." "I'll allow it." "Answer the question, Mrs. Harper." "It was humiliating," Simone said quietly. "I'd planned to attend as his wife, wearing an evening gown, supporting his work. Instead, I spent the evening serving drinks to his guests and business partners while he introduced another woman, his mistress, Vanessa Chen, as someone instrumental to his success. He never once acknowledged me as his wife. Did you know about his affair at that time?" "I suspected, but I had no proof until that night. Seeing them together, seeing how comfortable they were with each other, confirmed what I'd been trying not to believe." Jennifer walked her through the rest of that night, overhearing the conversation about the divorce plans, about the embezzlement, about Mitchell's contempt for her supposed simplicity. With each answer, Simone watched the jury's expressions harden. "Why didn't you confront him immediately?" "Because I realized that if Mitchell was stealing and planning to defraud people, I needed evidence to stop him. I couldn't just divorce him quietly. He would have continued hurting people. So I hired a divorce attorney, a forensic accountant, and a private investigator to gather proof of his crimes. And the night of the Urban Renaissance Fund event, when you revealed yourself as the building owner and exposed the fraud? By then we had comprehensive evidence of embezzlement, securities fraud, and money laundering. The FBI was prepared to make arrests. My role was simply to introduce myself as the building owner and explain that the investment opportunity was fraudulent. The goal was to protect the potential victims and ensure Mitchell faced justice for all his crimes, not just the fraud attempt." "Mrs. Harper, one final question. Did you love your husband?" The courtroom went quiet. Simone looked directly at Mitchell for the first time. "I thought I did. I loved the man. I believed he was kind, ambitious, honest. But that man never existed. The real Mitchell is someone who saw me as a tool to be used and discarded. Someone who stole from children's charities. Someone who harassed female employees and planned to defraud honest investors. No, I didn't love my husband. I loved a lie." "No further questions, Your Honor." Mitchell's lawyer approached for cross-examination, trying to paint Simone as vindictive, as someone who'd hidden her wealth to trap Mitchell, as a woman scorned who'd engineered his arrest out of jealousy. But Jennifer had prepared her well. "Mr. Carlson, I kept my assets separate to protect myself, which proved wise given your client's crimes. I didn't engineer anything. Your client committed fraud, embezzlement, and harassment all on his own. I simply ensured he faced consequences." "But you set up that final event, didn't you? You arranged for law enforcement to be there." "Yes, after I learned your client was planning to defraud investors of millions of dollars. Would you have preferred I let innocent people lose their life savings?" Carlson had no good answer to that. When Simone stepped down from the witness stand, she felt lighter. She'd told her truth in a public forum. She'd faced Mitchell without flinching. and she'd made sure the jury understood exactly who he was. The trial continued for another week. The defense tried to argue that Mitchell had made mistakes but wasn't a criminal, that the embezzlement was just poor bookkeeping, that the investment fund might have been successful if given a chance. The jury didn't buy it. When the verdict came back, guilty on all counts, Simone wasn't in the courtroom. She'd said everything she needed to say. She was in her office at the Grandeur Tower, working on plans for her new foundation, when Patricia called with the news. Guilty on all 18 counts, Patricia said triumphantly. Sentencing is in 6 weeks, but the prosecutor is recommending 15 years. With the evidence, he'll likely serve at least 10. Simone closed her eyes. And Vanessa? She got 5 years as part of her plea deal for cooperating. She'll probably serve 3. Justice. Not perfect but real. Mitchell would spend the next decade in prison, his reputation destroyed, his career over, his plans for a life with Vanessa reduced to nothing. He tried to steal from the vulnerable and defraud the trusting, and he'd failed. Thank you, Patricia. For everything. Are you kidding? This was the most satisfying case of my career. Watching you take him down was beautiful. After they hung up, Simone stood at her window looking out at the city. Somewhere, in a courtroom across town, Mitchell was being led back to jail in handcuffs. His lawyer was probably already planning an appeal that wouldn't go anywhere. His family was likely in shock, still processing the revelation that the son they'd been proud of was actually a criminal. Simone felt, not happy exactly. Justice wasn't happy. But she felt satisfied. Complete. Like a chapter had finally, truly ended. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. Heard the verdict. Congratulations. Also, FYI, we recovered $280,000 from offshore accounts. It's being returned to the foundation. Another text, this time from Diana. Justice served. Proud to have helped take down that piece of work. And finally from Tanya. Thank you for giving me my life back. Simone read that last one twice. Giving Tanya her life back. That's what this had been about, really? Not just revenge on Mitchell, though she wouldn't lie and say that hadn't been satisfying. But protecting people Mitchell would have hurt. Stopping a pattern of abuse and exploitation. Using her power to make things right. She thought about Mitchell ordering her to serve drinks, laughing about her supposed simplicity, planning to leave her destitute. He'd thought he was so smart, so much better than her. But in the end, the simple woman he'd dismissed had owned the ground he stood on. Had built an empire he couldn't imagine. Had the intelligence, resources, and determination to bring him down. Mitchell had ordered his wife to serve drinks at his gala, unaware she owned the $450 million building they were in. Now he knew. Now everyone knew. And he'd spend the next 10 years thinking about that mistake. Simone turned from the window and went back to work. She had a foundation to build, properties to manage, and a life to live, on her own terms, in her own way, without anyone making her smaller ever again. The empire she'd built would continue to grow. The women she'd helped through her foundation would achieve their own success. And the story of how she'd taken down her corrupt husband would become legend. A reminder that power isn't about dominance, but about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Mitchell had gambled everything on underestimating his wife. He'd lost. And Simone had won more than just a court case. She'd won her freedom, her dignity, and her future. And that was worth more than all the buildings in her portfolio combined. Simone stood in the conference room of her new foundation headquarters, reviewing architectural plans for a women's business center. 6 months had passed since Mitchell's conviction, and in that time her life had transformed in ways she never expected. The Harper Foundation for Women's Economic Empowerment had officially launched 3 months ago with a $50 million initial endowment from Simone's personal funds. The mission was simple: help women gain financial independence through education, entrepreneurship support, and legal assistance. They offered classes in financial literacy, provided small business loans with favorable terms, and maintained a legal clinic for women facing workplace discrimination or financial abuse. Tanya Brooks had joined as the foundation's program director, bringing both personal experience and professional expertise to the role. The two women had formed an unlikely friendship, bonded by their shared experience with Mitchell's cruelty and their determination to help others avoid the same fate. The architect says we can break ground next month, Tanya said, pointing to the plans. The business center will have classroom space, private offices for legal consultations, a computer lab, and a childcare facility so mothers can attend classes without worrying about their kids. Perfect. And the scholarship program. We have 35 applicants for the first round. All women who want to start businesses but lack access to traditional funding.
The selection committee meets next week. Simone's phone buzzed. A text from Grace, her property manager. The city council just approved the permits for the affordable housing project. You're officially developing 60 units for working families in the Riverside neighborhood. Another project Simone had started after the divorce. She'd purchased an undeveloped lot in a neighborhood struggling with gentrification and had committed to building quality affordable housing rather than luxury condos that would displace longtime residents. It wouldn't be as profitable as other options, but profit wasn't always the point. Simone. Tanya's voice brought her back. You okay? You've been staring at your phone for 2 minutes. Just thinking about how much has changed. Changed for the better, Tanya said firmly. You've helped more people in 6 months than Mitchell helped in his entire life. And that's not even counting the people you saved from his fraud. It was true. Letters arrived weekly from people thanking her, potential investors who'd been protected, employees Mitchell had mistreated who felt validated by his conviction, and women who'd heard her story and felt inspired to leave their own abusive situations or pursue their own ambitions. One letter had particularly moved her. A young woman named Robin had written, I was married to a man who controlled all our finances and told me I was too stupid to understand money. When I saw your story on the news, something clicked. I enrolled in a financial literacy class at the community college, got a job and opened my own bank account. Last month I left him. Your courage gave me courage. Thank you. Simone had framed that letter and hung it in her office. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. The process had been swift since Mitchell had no assets to fight over and no grounds to contest anything. Simone had reclaimed her maiden name, Simone Miller, honoring her grandmother's legacy. The Harper name, she decided, had brought her nothing but pain. Mitchell's sentencing had happened 4 months ago. 15 years in federal prison with eligibility for parole after 10. He'd stood before the judge looking hollow and defeated, gave a statement claiming he was sorry and had made mistakes, and was led away in handcuffs. Simone hadn't attended the sentencing. She'd already said everything she needed to say at the trial. Vanessa had been sentenced to 5 years and was currently serving time in a minimum security facility. Simone had heard through Diana that Vanessa was teaching computer skills to other inmates, trying to make the best of a bad situation. Simone felt nothing about it, no satisfaction, no sympathy, just indifference. Vanessa was facing the consequences of her choices just like Mitchell. The real victory, Simone had realized, wasn't Mitchell's imprisonment. It was her freedom. Freedom to live openly as herself, freedom to use her resources to help others, freedom to build the life she wanted without fear or compromise. Earth to Simone, Tanya said, waving a hand. You're doing it again. Where do you keep going in your head? Sorry? I have a meeting this afternoon that I'm nervous about. The university thing? Yeah. 6 weeks ago, Simone had been invited to speak at the City University's business school about her career in real estate. The talk had gone viral on social media. A combination of her business acumen and her story about taking down her corrupt husband had captured people's imagination. She'd been invited back for a follow-up discussion, and the dean had suggested she might consider teaching a course on commercial real estate investment. You're not actually nervous about teaching, are you? Tanya asked. You've already proven you can do anything. It's not teaching that makes me nervous. It's who else will be there. Oh. Tanya's eyes widened. The professor guy? Dr. Jerome Clark, Simone confirmed, feeling her cheeks warm slightly. She'd met Jerome at the first university talk. He was a professor of urban planning and sociology, a man in his early 40s with silver-streaked hair, warm brown skin, and eyes that crinkled when he smiled. During the Q&A after her presentation, he'd asked thoughtful questions about the social impact of her affordable housing projects and the role of private development in creating equitable cities. After the event, they'd talked for an hour about community development, gentrification, and the responsibility of wealth. Jerome had a PhD from Columbia, had written 2 books on urban inequality, and ran a nonprofit that provided planning assistance to underserved neighborhoods. He was brilliant, passionate about social justice, and genuinely interested in what Simone thought about complex issues. They'd gotten coffee once, then dinner, then a walk through the botanical gardens where they'd talked until the park closed. Jerome was different from anyone Simone had dated before. He didn't try to diminish her success or feel threatened by her wealth. He asked about her business with genuine curiosity and shared his own work with equal enthusiasm. When they disagreed about something, which they often did, he engaged with her ideas rather than dismissing them. Have you kissed him yet? Tanya asked with a grin. That's not appropriate workplace conversation. We're friends, not just colleagues. And you're blushing, which means you like him. Simone did like him. More than she'd expected to. After Mitchell, she'd assumed she'd be done with romance for years, maybe forever. The idea of trusting someone enough to let them into her life had seemed impossible. But Jerome wasn't Mitchell. He didn't need to control her to feel important. He celebrated her success rather than resenting it. He'd read about the trial and told her honestly, "What you did took incredible courage and intelligence. But what impresses me more is what you've built since. This foundation, these projects, this commitment to using your power for good." Still, Simone was cautious. 6 months wasn't long enough to know someone fully. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. The afternoon meeting at the university turned out to be less intimidating than she'd feared. The dean wanted to formalize her relationship with the business school, an adjunct professorship teaching 1 course per semester on commercial real estate development. She'd have access to research resources, opportunities to mentor students, and a platform to share her expertise. "We'd be honored to have you as part of our faculty," the dean said. "Your combination of business success and social consciousness is exactly what our students need to see." After the meeting, Jerome was waiting outside the administrative building, leaning against a tree with a book in his hands. "How'd it go?" he asked. "I'm apparently now a professor." "Congratulations, Professor Miller. Want to celebrate with coffee?" They walked to a cafe near campus, and Simone found herself relaxing in Jerome's presence the way she always did. He didn't need her to be anything other than herself. Didn't need her to perform or pretend or make herself smaller. "Can I ask you something?" Jerome said as they sat with their coffees. "Of course. Why did you really keep your business secret from Mitchell? I've read the explanations you've given in interviews, but I feel like there's more to it." Simone considered how to answer. "My grandmother told me once that a woman with money needs to be careful about who she trusts. She said some men can't handle being with a woman who has more than they do. They either try to take it, control it, or destroy the woman to make themselves feel bigger." "Your grandmother sounds wise." She was. "When I met Mitchell, I thought if I hid my success, I'd find out if he really loved me or just wanted what I had. Turns out he didn't love me at all, but not because of my money. He just didn't see me as fully human. I was a prop in his life story, nothing more." "His loss," Jerome said simply. "That's generous of you." "It's true. He had someone extraordinary and treated her as ordinary. That's not generosity on my part, it's just fact." Jerome reached across the table and took her hand gently. "For what it's worth, I think you're remarkable. Not because of the buildings you own or the empire you built, though those are impressive, but because of how you've chosen to use your power. You could have taken Mitchell down and walked away. Instead, you built something to help other women." Simone felt tears prick her eyes. "I just didn't want anyone else to go through what I did. That's what makes it remarkable." They talked until the cafe closed, about work and life and hopes for the future. When Jerome walked her to her car, he hesitated before saying, "I know you're being cautious. I know trust doesn't come easy after what you've been through. I'm not going anywhere, Simone. I'm not trying to rush you or push for more than you're ready to give. I just want you to know that I see you, the real you, all of you, and I like what I see." "I see you too," Simone said softly. "And I like what I see." When he kissed her goodnight, it was gentle and respectful and full of promise. Not like the demanding, controlling kisses Mitchell had given her, but like the beginning of something built on mutual respect and genuine care. Driving home, Simone thought about how strange life was. 6 months ago, she'd been serving drinks at a gala, humiliated and betrayed. Now she was teaching at a university, running a foundation, developing affordable housing, and maybe, just maybe, beginning to trust someone new. She'd built her empire alone, afraid to show anyone her full self. Now she was learning that real strength wasn't about hiding or protecting herself in isolation. It was about being fully herself and choosing carefully who to let into her life. Mitchell had tried to make her small. Instead, she'd become larger than he could have imagined. And the best part? She was just getting started. 1 year after Mitchell's arrest, Simone stood in front of a crowd of 300 women at the Harper Foundation's first annual conference. The theme was Building Your Empire, Financial Independence Through Entrepreneurship, and the auditorium was filled with women of all ages, backgrounds, and dreams. "A year ago," Simone began, her voice carrying clearly through the space, "I was a woman with a secret. I'd built a successful business, but I'd hidden it from everyone, including my husband, because I was afraid of how the truth might change things. I thought keeping my success quiet would protect me. Instead, it nearly destroyed me." She told her story, not the sensationalized version from the news, but the real story. The grandmother who taught her about property and power.
The years of building her empire in secret. The marriage to a man who'd seen her as nothing. The night she'd been forced to serve drinks in her own building. And the moment she decided to stop hiding and start fighting back. "I'm not telling you this story so you'll feel sorry for me," she continued. "I'm telling you because I want you to understand something important. Your success is nothing to apologize for. Your ambition is nothing to hide. Your intelligence, your drive, your accomplishments, these are things to celebrate, not diminish." The crowd was silent, attentive. Simone could see women nodding, some wiping their eyes. "For too long, I made myself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. I dimmed my light so I wouldn't outshine someone who should have been celebrating my glow. I apologized for my success and pretended to be less than I was. And it almost cost me everything." She clicked to the next slide, showing photos of the foundation's work over the past year. Women in business classes, entrepreneurs receiving their first small business loans, legal clinic clients who'd won settlements against discriminatory employers. This foundation exists because I decided to stop hiding. Because I realized that real power isn't about making yourself small, it's about making space for others to grow. We've helped 347 women start businesses this year. We've provided legal assistance to 89 women facing workplace discrimination. We've taught financial literacy to 523 women who'd been told they were too stupid to understand money. The crowd applauded and Simone smiled. We've also recovered over $2 million from my ex-husband's schemes, which we've distributed back to the charity he stole from. That charity now partners with us to provide mentorship programs for disadvantaged youth. My ex tried to take from the vulnerable. Now we're giving back to them with interest. More applause, louder this time. But here's the thing, I couldn't have done any of this alone. Building an empire isn't about isolation. It's about collaboration, mentorship, and supporting each other. It's about successful women reaching back to help others climb. She introduced several of the foundation's success stories. Tanya spoke about leaving a toxic workplace and finding purpose in the foundation's work. A woman named Monica talked about starting a catering business with a foundation microloan and now employing 12 people. A lawyer named Patricia, yes, the same Patricia who'd handled Simone's divorce, discussed the legal clinic and how they'd helped women recover over $4 million in unpaid wages and settlements. When Simone returned to the podium, she took a deep breath. "I have one more announcement. The Harper Foundation is launching a new program, the Dorothy Miller Scholarship for Young Women in Real Estate." A photo of her grandmother appeared on the screen, a black and white image of a strong woman with wise eyes. "My grandmother left me a single building and a world of wisdom. From that foundation I built everything I have today. This scholarship will provide full tuition, mentorship, and seed funding for 10 young women each year to study real estate development and start their own investment portfolios. Because every woman deserves the chance to build her own empire." The applause was thunderous. Women stood, some crying, some cheering. Simone stood at the podium looking out at all these faces and felt a profound sense of purpose. After the conference there was a reception. Simone mingled, talking with attendees, answering questions and listening to stories. So many women had experienced what she had, being dismissed, underestimated, made to feel small by people who should have supported them. "You gave us permission to be proud," one woman told her. "I've been hiding my business success from my family because they say successful women intimidate men. But after hearing your story, I realized I don't want a man who's intimidated by my success. I want a partner who celebrates it." "Exactly right," Simone said. Jerome appeared at her elbow, offering her a glass of water. Over the past 6 months, their relationship had deepened. They'd taken it slow, building trust brick by brick. He'd met her team, attended foundation events, and supported her work without trying to control or direct it. She'd met his family, learned about his research, and attended his book launch for his latest publication on equitable urban development. They hadn't moved in together. Simone wasn't ready for that yet, but they spent several nights a week together, talking, laughing, planning projects, and building something real. Jerome had even started volunteering at the foundation, teaching a class on community development that complemented the business courses perfectly. "You were brilliant up there," he said quietly. "Thank you for being here." "Always." That evening, after the conference ended, Simone returned to her penthouse. The space felt like home now, filled with photos of her grandmother, artwork from local artists she supported, and books on business, urban planning, and women's history. It was her sanctuary, her command center, and her refuge. She poured a glass of wine and stood at the window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there was the Grandeur Tower, her first major acquisition and the site of both her greatest humiliation and her ultimate triumph. She could see it from her window, a tall building with lights on many floors, busy even at night. She owned that building. Owned it completely without apology or shame. And she owned 42 others with plans to acquire more. Mitchell had told Vanessa that Simone had contributed nothing to his success, that she'd done nothing with her life. If he could see her now, foundation established, lives changed, empire expanding, would he finally understand how wrong he'd been? Probably not. Men like Mitchell rarely learned. They blamed everyone but themselves, convinced until the end that they were the victims of circumstance rather than the architects of their own downfall. But Simone didn't think about Mitchell much anymore. He was serving his sentence in federal prison, 7 years still ahead of him. He'd appealed twice and both appeals had been denied. He was out of her life completely, just a cautionary tale she sometimes told when explaining why the foundation mattered. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Saw the conference live stream. Dorothy would be so proud of you. Another text from Grace. Boss, the Chicago property deal closed. You now own buildings in 3 states. Queen of commercial real estate. Crown. And one more from Jerome. Dinner tomorrow night? I have something I want to ask you. Simone smiled at that last text. She could guess what Jerome wanted to ask. They'd been discussing taking their relationship to the next level, maybe moving in together or making future plans. She wasn't scared of the conversation anymore. Jerome had proven over and over that he was different from Mitchell, that he could be trusted with her heart. But even if Jerome hadn't been in her life, Simone would have been happy. She'd learned the most important lesson. She didn't need a partner to be complete. She was whole on her own. Any relationship she chose to have would be an addition to an already full life, not a necessity to fill an empty space. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, hurt, hiding, humiliated. That woman had been forced to serve drinks at a gala while her husband mocked her supposed simplicity. That woman had felt powerless and small. But that woman had also been strong enough to fight back. Smart enough to gather evidence. Brave enough to expose the truth. And wise enough to transform her pain into purpose. Simone raised her glass to her reflection in the window. To the empire we built, Grandma, she whispered. And to the one we're still building. The next morning, Simone woke to news alerts on her phone. A major business magazine had published a feature article about her titled, The Woman Who Built an Empire in Secret, How Simone Miller Became One of the City's Most Powerful Real Estate Developers. The article was thorough and fair, covering her career, the Mitchell situation, and the foundation's work. It ended with a quote from an industry expert. Simone Miller represents a new generation of commercial real estate developers, focused not just on profit, but on community impact. She's proving that you can be successful and socially conscious, that you can build wealth and lift others up at the same time. Simone's phone rang. The university dean. Simone, have you seen the article? Just reading it now. We'd like to offer you a named professorship. The Simone Miller Chair in Real Estate Development and Social Impact. Full professor position, your own research budget, and the ability to design your own curriculum. We want to make what you're teaching a central part of our business school. Simone was speechless for a moment. That's incredible. You've earned it. Let me know when you're ready to discuss details. After they hung up, Simone sat with her coffee and let herself feel the full weight of how far she'd come. From a 12-year-old girl learning about rent rolls in her grandmother's kitchen to a named professor at a major university. From a woman hiding her success to someone teaching others how to achieve their own. Mitchell had ordered her to serve drinks at his gala, thinking she was nobody special. Now she was somebody, not because of who she'd married or what she'd inherited, but because of what she'd built with her own hands, her own mind, and her own determination. The irony was beautiful. That evening, Simone met Jerome for dinner at a quiet restaurant they both loved. Over wine and pasta they talked about their days, their work, and their plans. I have something to tell you, Jerome said as dessert arrived. I'm listening. I've been offered a position at another university. Department chair, full professor, excellent salary. It's an opportunity I've been working toward for years. Simone felt her stomach drop. That's wonderful. Where? Here. Same city, different university. I'm not going anywhere, Simone. I turned down offers from 3 other schools because I don't want to leave. I don't want to leave my work here, and I don't want to leave you. Relief flooded through her. You're staying? I'm staying. But I want to make sure we're on the same page about what that means. I'm not asking you to commit to anything you're not ready for. But I need you to know that I'm all in. I'm not going anywhere.
I'm building a life here and I'm hoping that life includes you. Simone reached across the table and took his hand. I'm not ready to move in together yet. I need my own space, my own independence. After Mitchell, I need to know I can stand on my own. I understand that. But I want you in my life. I want to keep building what we're building. I want to see where this goes at whatever pace feels right. That works for me, Jerome said softly. I'm not Mitchell, Simone. I don't need to control you or own you. I just want to be part of your life, whatever form that takes. Then we're on the same page. They clinked glasses and Simone felt something settle in her chest. Trust. Oh. She was building something new with Jerome, something based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. And if it didn't work out, she'd be okay. Because she'd proven to herself that she could survive anything. 2 weeks later, Simone received a letter. It was from Mitchell, forwarded by Patricia with a sticky note that read, "You don't have to read this. But I thought you should know," he wrote. Simone debated for a long time before opening it. Finally, sitting in her office at the foundation, she unfolded the pages. The letter was 7 pages of apologies, explanations, and excuses. Mitchell claimed he'd been under pressure at work, that he'd made terrible choices, that he was sorry for how he'd treated her. He said prison had given him time to reflect on his mistakes. He said he understood now how special she was, how much he'd lost. The letter ended, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. I hope you found happiness. I hope you've built the life you deserve." Simone read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope and placed it in a drawer. She felt nothing, no anger, no satisfaction, no pain. Mitchell was part of her past and she was focused on her future. She never wrote back. 3 months later, the Dorothy Miller Scholarship announced its first recipients. 10 young women, selected from hundreds of applicants, each one brilliant and ambitious and ready to build their own empires. Simone met them all individually, shared her grandmother's story, and promised to mentor them through their journey. "You're going to face people who underestimate you," she told them. "People who think you're too young, too inexperienced, too female, too whatever to succeed. Ignore them. Build anyway. And when you've built your empire, reach back and help the next woman climb." She watched these young women, Black, Latina, Asian, white, from different backgrounds and circumstances, all sharing the same determination she'd had at their age. They would face obstacles. They would encounter sexism and doubt. But they would also have resources she hadn't had. Mentors, funding, and a foundation committed to their success. 1 year became 2, then 3. The foundation grew. Simone's real estate portfolio expanded to 6 states and over 60 properties. Her relationship with Jerome deepened into partnership. They eventually moved in together, into a house they bought jointly, splitting everything equally because they were equals. She never remarried. She didn't need marriage to feel complete or legitimate. But she built a life full of purpose, love, and impact. And every year, on the anniversary of the night Mitchell had made her serve drinks at the Gala, Simone threw a party. Not in the Grandeur Tower ballroom where she'd been humiliated, but in the Foundation's community center, surrounded by women she'd helped and friends she'd made. They celebrated success, resilience, and the power of women who refused to be diminished. At the 5th annual party, Tanya raised a toast. To Simone Miller, who proved that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something beautiful and helping others do the same. Everyone raised their glasses. Simone looked around at the faces of women she'd empowered, causes she'd supported, and lives she'd changed. She thought about Mitchell in prison, probably still convinced he'd been the victim of his circumstances. She thought about the empire she'd built, larger and more impactful than anything he could have imagined. And she smiled. Because he'd ordered his wife to serve drinks at his gala, unaware she owned the $450 million building they were in. And that wife had taken everything he'd tried to destroy and turned it into something magnificent. Simone Miller had built her empire twice, once in secret, once in the light. And the second time she'd built it not just for herself, but for every woman who'd ever been told she was too simple, too naive, too anything to succeed. Mitchell had wanted to make her small. Instead, she'd become legendary. And that, Simone thought as she raised her own glass, was the real happy ending.